Hello friends, welcome to my channel Sushant Chesswise. Today we are going to look at the next topic, that is the Zugzwang. So we have discussed what is Zugzwang. Let me tell you, Zugzwang is a position where we force the opponent to make a move. So there are two sides, one side is superior and the other side is inferior. The superior side forces the opponent to move in such a way that either he loses his piece material or he gets checkmated. So it has come from the German word Zug, means to move, and Zwangen is to force. So we force the opponent to make the move, and whatever he does, he loses. So from this position we will see the basic concept. So it's an endgame position. Zugzwang is more common in the endgame, but today we are going to look at some very interesting positions based on middle game as well. So this is the position with black to play. So I have taken the initial positions are slightly easy. Let us see what happens. So the problem with the white king is that it is coming towards the black side. Okay, and usually in endgame it's not a problem. But here what has happened, the king has got only two places. So black is able to force things now. So black goes for the move bishop c1. As per our method, we go into the forced moves first. So that is the only check we have. The other option is h5, threatening to mate by bishop c1. But if we play h5, firstly white himself can give check, and secondly the king can move to e3 and get out of the meeting net over here. So bishop c1 check, king g4, h5 check, king has to go to h4, and here we see that white is unable to move many things, because see, these two pawns cannot move, h pawn cannot move, king has no place to move, only knight and pawn are able to move. So if we can play the bishop in such a way that knight will not be able to move or the pawn will not be able to move, then it will become a case of typical Zugzwang. So what we see, the knight has plenty of squares. See, h2, g1, e1, okay, on d2 it is hanging, and also on g5 it is hanging. But what we notice, when the king is on h4, if this knight moves, moment the knight moves, bishop g5 would be checkmate. Okay, so that is the point black is trying to exploit. So let's play the moves and see. Bishop c1 check, kg4, h5 check, kh4. Noting that this knight cannot move, black wastes the bishop move and creates a threat at the same time. So he plays bishop e3. So actually speaking, we are not creating any threat. We are putting white on the move where whatever he moves, he suffers. So if knight goes away, just now like I told you, g1, h2, e1, then bishop g5 is checkmate. So the only other option remains to move the g pawn, and moment he moves the g pawn to g4, then bishop f2 checkmate. So this position we will say that white is in Zugzwang. Let's have a look at the next position here. Again we have got a bishop and knight scenario. In an open board, bishop's power is usually more than the knight. To compensate bishop's power, the knight has to be centralized, and we see that pawns and bishop together can control both the colors. So if we place the pawns on the opposite color of the bishop, we will be able to control white and black both colors. For knight itself is capable of controlling both the colors, but the bishop's mobility is more. So what happens? And the bishop is capable of wasting the moves also. So in open board, what we see, pawn and bishop together can obstruct the knight. This is a very similar example of that case. So here what happens? We see that black is pawn up and should be able to win the game otherwise also. But if the white knight manages from g3 to e4, then the knight will pose some problems. The king will be still safe on e6, but the knight will do some nice job, and we can try to attack the b6 pawn. Even then we will say black has a very good plan of going g6, h5 and creating an outside passer and winning the game. But black went with a very strong move, bishop f4. So this technique we discussed once before also. whenever bishop is placed on the fourth square from the knight, 1, 2, 3, 4, including the knight square, so fourth from knight, 1, 2, 3, 4, we see that it obstructs all the squares towards that bishop. So see, these all squares are blocked now and the knight is unable to come to the game. So now what happens? Either the king will have to move, which will allow our king to enter on c5 or d5 squares, then we can win the b5 pawn, or he has to move the g pawn. Here, after the move g5, there are two options, bishop into g5, but it will allow the knight to become free. For at the cost of one pawn, we don't want the knight to become free. Here black can do very strong moves. See, g6 is also good, but he can do h5, to which white might take n percent, and after g into h6, we see that h5, h4, h3, h2 is almost unstoppable. The knight has to be given up. He attempt to reach king and pawn and again, let's say kd3, then kc5. After knight e3, bishop e3, ke3, will first play h5, force the king to go over there, take the b pawn and promote our b pawn to queen. So white will never get enough time to take the e5 pawn and black will win the game. In the game, white went king d3 actually. In the game, white went kd3. Let's look at the move kb4. After kb4, kd5, again we see that there is not much to choose from. If the king goes to a4, we go kc4 followed by kd3, ke2 and win the trapped knight on f1. And if king comes to c3 to stop our king's entry, then the king goes to c5 and takes the b pawn and black will start pushing his b pawn as well. So black will win the game very easily. That white went kd3, black played kc5, and now he tried knight e3. So it looks like a decent try, because after bishop e3, king into e3, it looks like there will be a race now, kb5, ke4. So there is one technique which says whenever there is a race of pawns, just count the number of moves which is going to take place. See, let's see now. Before taking bishop e3, black will count. After bishop e3, ke3, see, kb5 1, kc4 2, and how many pawn moves? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 2 plus 5, 7 moves. And for white, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 moves in all. And black is taking 7 moves. But what has happened here? It looks like queen then queen, right? But the move is also black's now. So actually there is gap of 2 moves. So let's see. kb5, ke4, kc4, safer than c5 because f8 should not happen with check. So we are avoiding that. So king e5, b5, f4, b4, f5. Here h6 is also very simple and strong. b3, g5, b2, f6, takes, and b1 will become queen. After which the pawn moves to f7. Queen can stop it in various ways. Simplest qb4, coming on the diagonal and stopping the pawn from queening. And black won the game. Let's look at the next position here. It is black to play now. Gradually we are going into position with more pieces. At first we can say that the position should be roughly level, at least materially. But as per our technique, we always try to measure king safety and activity above material. So we can easily say that the white king is not at all well placed. Firstly, it has no place to move, and we see that our king's activity is very high. It is already heading towards the opponent's king. In the end game, the king can be easily centrally placed. See, even though there are rook and bishops on the board for white, still the black king can manage from the other color because bishop is unable to control the other color here. So black identifies that he is able to create a waiting net with the moves ke3, kf2. Problem right now is that the g pawn is hanging. So after the move g4, so the candidate moves which come to mind is g2 check forcing. Then there is g4 and there is the move king e3. which is the slowest amongst the three. So if we do bg2 here, after bg2 rg2 rd1 rg1, then nothing much we can gain over there. After the move g4, which is very interesting, because after fg we just quit the bishop on e4. So g4 also looks very interesting move to me. But after g4, maybe the rook will be able to move to a1 and rook a4 check could be tried. Even though I feel there also after the move g3, black is better. But black realized that he is able to create a mating net and he is able to mate by force. Let's see what is the idea. Black played ke3. Now bishop cannot move because f3 is hanging. Once f3 is gone, bg2 will be mating or winning the rook by force. So bishop cannot move, this pawn on d5 cannot move, f3 cannot move, h2 cannot move. So only the rook is capable of moving. So if the rook gives check from e1, then comes kf2, and now after the only move rook g1, because bg2 check is mate. Here black has a very simple and very strong move, rook d1, and we see that white is losing. He is in a state of Zugzwang, forced rook into d1 and bg2 mates. In fact, we would say that here itself white is in a state of Zugzwang, because other than rook, nothing is able to move, but if the rook moves, he is getting mated by force. Same happens to any other move, rook move like rook a1, then also just king f2, and again see rook g1 is forced to stop bg2 mate, and to rook g1 we are reaching the same position rd1 and black wins. Hence, after the move ke3 only we can say that white is in Zugzwang. Let's look at the last position now. This is a typical, we can say, middle game kind of situation. Late middle game is there, and it's very difficult to believe that white should be in a state of Zugzwang, because so many pieces are there and many are able to move. It's not that many pieces are unable to move like in the previous case. By the way, at this point I must tell you, this is the symbol of Zugzwang. Okay, this is how we write Zugzwang. Okay, so this is the position with black to play. Here the problem is the square g2 and h1 are very weak, and king is unable to move to g3 also because of the h4 pawn. So basically white is finding himself in a sort of mating net. Okay, but what can black do now? So the move which black plays is actually a preventive move. It stops most of the white moves. Okay, so the first move that black plays here is rook g8. This move is somewhat difficult to find and difficult to understand basically. See what is happening right now. Black is unable to attack a particular point, g2 or h1. So what he does, he tries to increase pressure on the g2 point. So this rook g8 move is not letting the bishop move. If the bishop moves, then rg2 wins on the spot. Second, if f1 moves to f6, which looks very strong, then comes rg5, and after f7, when we find that pawn is about to queen by force, but rg2, qg2 and qg2 is checkmate. If the rook moves to e5, then just queen into f5. We attack the bishop, okay, and bishop's movement to h4 will allow rook g2 check. So the bishop will come under pressure. So finally we see that queen is also unable to move because of qg2. So queen has no place to keep g2 and g5 controlled other than the d2 square. So queen is also unable to move. Pawns are unable to move. We saw that other than f1, no pawns are able to move. So white had to play the move rook g1. But moment he plays rook g1, the king's place to g1 is lost. And what happens? Black is able to use the tactics along the b8 h2 diagonal. So now what happens? Because of the overloading, now we calculate and see that after qd6 check, there is bishop f4, but then there is chance of going rook g2. Okay, even then white can do rook g2. So what do we see? This queen and bishop, they are the defenders. So black takes rook into g5, exploiting the overloading of the rook. Now if rook takes g5, then qh1 is checkmate. Okay, and if queen takes g5, which is almost forced, then comes qd6 check, and we see that now f4 is undefended. So the only chance would be rook g3, when if we calculate properly, black, we'll see that black just manages to get a winning endgame and he stops the white pawn from queening one time. So queen g3 check, queen g3, fg3, kg3. It looks like these two pawns are somewhat dangerous, but bishop into a4, f6, and bishop manages on e8, okay, on time. And what will happen? By the time the king will manage kg4, kg5, kh6, kg7, and then f7. We see there 1, 2, 3, and 4 moves. In 4 moves, the black pawn will become queen. And because bishop is on e8, it is stopping the move h5 as well. So h4, h5, for that also have to do h4, kg4, h5. The pawn will be already on a2 by then. Let's calculate, let's play the moves and see now. So queen g3 check, queen g3, fg3, kg3, bishop a4, f6, bishop e8, kg4, a4, h4, a3, h5, and now what we see? bh5, kh5, a2, f7, a1, f8 is not very clear. Although black is better there also after queen into c3, but generally we don't want such a queen endgame. Queen endgame is most difficult to convert. Black can just do a2, and after a3 he can easily play a1 queen also. He can consider bg6 also. a1 queen wins very easily over here. After a1, h7, we can just do queen h1 and stop the white pawn from queening. So this was slightly tricky and difficult position, I would say. So this was all about Zugzwang in the middle game. In future I will be doing more positions, more difficult ones based on Zugzwang. I hope you are enjoying these lessons. Do like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for your time.